So we're not starting with Django, right? Like, because we
No,
don't
no.
want to get canceled. We
Yeah,
gotta
no,
we gotta put a buffer movie in there first.
yeah,
So
we take the boring, most vanilla one. So we start with High
High
Noon.
Noon.
okay, all right.
Oh, boring
Now
vanilla.
Wait, it's the
I
Oh,
most
come
classic, right? So
on.
it's the
in
most genre
yeah.
tropey. It's the
Yeah, no, that's
the most.
that's
No,
kind of
it's
echoes it.
foundational.
Eh,
Look, if it's the original, you can't call it tropey and blah 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 and
but
whatever if it sets
right,
the
so
standard.
it might be the trope
Like,
setters. It's just it's the
and it isn't, but it's the earliest version we have. But yes,
Yeah.
you're not wrong, but I'm going to defend it just a little bit. It doesn't make
I'm
it
not
bad,
saying it's a bad
you
movie,
know. So
but
yeah,
okay. Shall we?
but High Moon. That's a different thing. Never mind. So
Okay.
Hmm.
Ben,
Ben,
explain your pick
Yeah.
of a
of all
western.
of all the early westerns, my dude. Why
Well,
this
you
one?
know, I tried to choose one that had a strong central hero,
Okay.
somebody you could root for, somebody who I think really epitomizes um, why westerns are all very very moralistic, um, but also one that wasn't hokey. I think some of the very early ones in terms of talkie westerns, like Stagecoach, that's John Wayne's breakout role, right? And it's a John Wayne movie. He's kind of the anti-hero figure, uh, but it still has a lot of the white hat, black hat, shoot the Indians thing. And I didn't really want that kind of thing. I also didn't want something that was more genre bendy, like very recent. The example that we've already watched is Bone Tomahawk, right? And it was I don't want some meta commentary. I just wanted it to be a solid western with a solid hero you root for. Um,
You didn't want meta commentary on westerns, or you didn't
yeah,
want meta
on
commentary?
westerns, right? You know,
Okay,
like
because this movie has meta commentary. It's just not for the western genre.
You're right. So that's the one thing
Yeah.
that was I thought disappointed about. It's one of those things where Hollywood blacklist writers trying to write about what it's like to be on the Hollywood blacklist, but maybe just doesn't have enough imagination to realize that it's more of a universal human experience to feel like
Right.
people abandon you, right? Which is his
I
problem,
think
not
they
mine.
accomplished that. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, the meta commentary of the blacklisting, that's fine, but they did do the story correctly of executed it well, so they accomplished the human universality of it as well.
Well, that's something
Yeah.
that I think a lot of movies get very very showy these days with. We're taking a trope and we're subverting it, like it's consciously postmodern. This is not. This is very. It's actually very just modern.
Yeah.
It's just the hero, and it questions institutions and people and kinds of people. And there are people who want to stand up behind Gary Cooper, but they're just not. For one reason or another, they shouldn't, right? And the people who could won't, either out of cowardice or because they're too busy arguing about it, or one way or another. And then once the
Ego,
deed's
like,
done,
was one of them. So
what was that?
His deputy, it was Ego, right?
Oh yeah. Well, also, ultimately, a cowardice that he's not willing to put up a fight, right? He's all by himself. If there were a crowd, he'd join a crowd. And you think that he's not going to be one of those guys, and it's revealed that finally he is when push comes to shove, and it's just him.
Right.
And a lot of, and I think though it's one of those movies that, like 3:10 to Yuma, is based on a Western short story, ultimately, and the core plot, beginning and end, is there. All of the things that the movie adds in its adaptation, which is basically every character besides one or two or three. I looked at the short story. I think 3:10 to Yuma is the same way. There's like a couple of characters, adds to and decorates this wonderful little morality tale of what courage is and what manliness is. And I think ultimately, and this is something that I wanted to bring up maybe later on, but I remain a strong believer that genre is largely defined by the thematic content of your story rather than just the setting, right? And so I would defend something like Django Unchained as being a Western because not just does it have the basic aesthetic and cinematography and other things, it's about manliness and about morality and being the do-gooder. Although because Django Unchained is so recent, it tends to be more like aren't we all just bastards? But here's some bastards who aren't quite bastardly, right? High Noon is here's a town of good-hearted people, but ultimately they're kind of a little bit of bastards too. And the one guy who's willing to stand up for the town and take care of it has to stand alone. So I think one thing interesting that High Noon does subvert, and this will be the last thing I say, but I want to let you guys talk about it, is that the hero isn't wearing a black hat. That was very weird at the time. That was a subversion of genre tropes at the time, that the hero would wear a black hat because the black hat means you're the bad guy and the white hat means you're the good guy. But in this one, Gary Cooper is wearing the black hat. And even when the two ladies are walking away, there's the black and white thing. The lady in black looks back at him, and his wife doesn't even bother looking at when they're in the carriage going away. It's something that the black and white movies played with as Westerns, and even as early as High Noon, that's being subverted. So anyway, so I think more.
I'm glad you bring that up, because it's like everybody's heard that trope probably, right? But I wasn't thinking about it when I was watching the movie, nor did it come up in the trivia. So I'm kind of glad you brought that up, because with our current lens looking backwards, it wouldn't be as obvious, right?
Right.
Django's not
because
wearing a white
everyone's
hat.
an anti-hero.
None of the guys in any of the movies, I think, were wearing a white hat, unless they were supposed to be the good guy and they're kind of like a coward or whatever. Like, maybe you saw like the marshal was wearing a white hat at certain times or something like that, but when the gunfights break out, where's he? He's not there. So it's like I can't think, like in Tombstone, none of the heroes are wearing a white hat. In my movie True Grit, etc. Like none of the heroes at any point wore a white hat. So looking backwards, it doesn't resonate with us necessarily, but in the time, that's important historical context. So yeah.
I mean, I guess if at the time of the movies of all this, like 50s or so in the spaghetti westerns, they were trying to signify this is the good guy because of the color that he wears, and that became so obvious to be boring. This helps me understand something that happened in the first season. Was it second season? Well, I don't know. Westworld. While it was still good, there was a character you don't understand a lot of things. But that character is always wearing a white hat, white suit, and then when he puts on a black hat, it felt like it was supposed to be very significant, and it's just like, it's a fucking hat. I don't care. Okay, it's because black is a bad color. Shut up, bitch. And okay, it helps it more to me now of like this meant something to the genre it was writing to.
Yeah, okay. Right. Well, right. Westworld is already there. I only saw the movie with Yul Brynner, which really. I don't know. That's really on brand for me. I only saw the movie with the King and I actor, but that is that movie. It's the movie this show is based on is already playing around with that idea and
I think it was
how wild
book,
people are,
or even a book series originally. But like, if you like the westerns, I highly recommend at least the first season. I think the second season went to shit, and I'm afraid to touch any of the other ones.
I only watched the first season and then started the second one, and I wasn't invested in the same way, and just kind of fell off.
But the first season is fantastic in terms of like the themes that it's going on. This is not our topic of conversation. I'll be quick, but it does explore everything about the Western genre, I think, as well.
Oh yeah, and I think the plot twist by the end of the season was like really well set up and very good.
It was great. Yeah. So let's go back to High Noon. Yeah.
Director, since you're talking, do you want to start us out? Your point of view, perspective, whatever, your take.
Let's see. So this is the oldest one on our list, and one that's most classicest of it, because we've got like Tombstone was newer in the '93, and then the other ones were remakes, and then Django was questionable. This was the one I was asking for of the most classic Western, and I'm glad I have watched it. Now I can understand it better. I liked it more once I learned of the meta commentary. And rather than just, I felt like they were like wasting time in a way. Like this isn't what I expected out of a Western. Of like it's supposed to be the showdown, it's supposed to be some of the ramifications thereof. But I also, on the other side, appreciated that all these people were talking about the danger of actually facing the guy that they're so afraid of. Like the conversation, right. Especially like in the church, of the for it and against it. Of like, do you remember a time when a good woman couldn't walk down the street without fear of being attacked? Or what have I been paying all my taxes for that now that you have to come get volunteers for people that I've been paying for years. Like that, the depth of the research about that was it's very interesting to me, and I appreciated that more once I realized what it was doing. Other than that, it was just like, what the fuck is happening? How can an hour take 2 hours?
No, it doesn't take 2 hours. It's not quite in real time, but there are certainly, a chunk of the movie is in real time, and I think that's important to it as well. It's called High Noon. He finds out about a problem a little before 10, right? And he has 2 hours to solve it since his wedding, on his way out of town, coming back to town, getting his job back.
People are already telling him it's not his business. He should stand down. He realizes he's the only one who can do it. He's pushed out of town.
Only one who will do it, is kind of what it comes down to, right? Because because he got, like at various times he gets a supporter, right? But then they back out for different things, and it's like if they had just all shown up at the same time, he would have had himself at least a comparable, squad, if not a posse, like he was hoping. And he was doing it, a smart psychological way that it's like, look, I don't want a gunfight. That's what we're trying to avoid, which is why I need like 15 dudes with guns, because then the 4 of them would be stupid to have a gunfight with us, right? And we avoid it, and hopefully they'll move on. That's where he started, but he couldn't get a dude to show up with him. But yeah,
Judge was just like, yeah, I'm out of town.
You see the villains at the beginning, and they're just sitting around.
Right.
You just have to take it on faith that this is what these guys are like, because as far as you know, they're just waiting for their friend to get out of prison, right? Of course, when they show up and then it starts, right?
There's a lot of social drift since then, right? Because that's definitely a thing. Like you definitely get a lot harder line in, especially in High Noon, that it's like, well, why don't you just go arrest them? Because they haven't done anything yet.
I did like that moment.
So, yeah.
And
it's like,
that's another thing that the movie was talking about. It says the kind of mob mentality, the mob blacklisting, as well as the mob, well, I don't like these people, so go take them away. If they haven't done anything wrong yet. And that's the problem of the good guys. You have to stick to the good letter of the law.
Right.
Yeah.
And Gary Cooper knows he's going to get shot, but he still yells the guy's name first, and he's immediately shot at, and then just dives. So, the constraint of morality is really crucial to the drama of the Western. Don't shoot first. It's the whole point of the standoff, right? Don't shoot first.
Right. Unlike Rooster, who is very much a shoot first.
So it's almost funny how many of our Westerns, even True Grit, right? The John Wayne novel, the novel the John Wayne movie is based on, and the remake is based on. It's got a strong theological vision, strong moralistic vision, and it's still subverting the Western genre in the 1960s. So, but at its heart is that question of what does it mean to be good? I think that's really crucial to the trope.
The Western genre has been going since like late 1930s or something about that point.
In terms of pulp novels, it's actually going on. The novels are still going on when it's contemporary. Like Wild Bill Hickok, he's a lot of those early, Anna Get Your Gun types on the shows are playing up their own mythology to help sell tickets.
Right.
I was thinking movies, but
movies. That's true.
If we go like that, then it was like contemporary, right? It was like urban fantasy.
Basically.
It was urban fantasy because the city folk don't believe it, but like Wyatt Earp, for example, right, and a few others, like they literally were alive to move to Hollywood when Hollywood starts making movies, so that they can tell their version of events, so that they can again further their legend. So that's the thing. It's like, pretty much since there were people living Westerns and gunslingers, they'd find people to write their story, and then those stories would eventually transition to film immediately, right? Like as soon as the genre was available. You also got to think like, science fiction wasn't really a genre, right? Like you've got a couple of early examples, like you've got Metropolis, you've got Nosferatu for horror and that sort of thing, but it's not like those are exceptions. There isn't like, oh yeah, let's go see what the latest sci-fi movie is. It's like, yeah, let's go see this weird thing. But there were tons of Western movies early on, you know, and then like eventually like you start getting the war movies when, you know, that all becomes you know, more prevalent as well, you know, for the world wars and everything. But
it is mind-boggling to think about the amount of change someone around that period has seen in the world.
Right. Hell, my grandfather, you know, like my grandfather was, he was born in like the pretty early 1900s. And so it's like, it, you know, unironically, he was alive when horses were still the primary mode of transportation. It's like, obviously they've got trains. They definitely had automobiles and that sort of thing, but still it was pretty much horses. And he lived all the way up to here. And I'm trying to teach him how to get into his cable, you know, so he can watch his shows, or, you know, I got my smartphone looking stuff up in my pocket. You know, it's crazy the amount of stuff that had happened in a human lifespan, but basically like 100 years. And I mean, if you go like 150 years, it's wild. You know, the tech trees that we made as a civilization, it's just out of control.
Yeah,
so
even my grandfather, who let me just think, I guess he was born right before World War II. So he can't really remember it, right? Because he was a baby around that time. But, you know, even he talked about how we were driving down the road here, around here. He's like, how it was like really, really like narrow compared to how it is now. And it was mostly like horses, cars were rare, and stuff like that. And that was the 1950s.
Well,
ironically, not a lot of wagons then.
This is a weird deep cut, but famously, Dwight D. Eisenhower, when he was running for president, had a memoir, and he justified his expansion of the interstate highway system and explained it because in his memoir, he was talking about how he remembers hitching posts when he was a child, right? So that's in like 1951, his campaign. I don't know why I know this, but so people watching this movie in this year remember hitching posts if they're old enough,
right?
And so this is almost like I said. This a lot of these westerns kind of about that transition from, you know, Wild West to settlement, and even Red Dead Redemption 2. Like that's the whole theme of that whole game. And part of that I think is because the formative years of the Western were about that transition, and people alive remembered it. Like people in the 80s or people in the 70s might have remembered greasers, and that's why American Graffiti was a thing, right? Happy Days. This was the happy days of 1950,
right? Well, yeah, I mean, just think about it like this too. Like, you know, we've got Jeff Bridges' dad is in this movie as a kid, right? Basically, I mean, he's a 20-something kid, and he's in this movie, right? And Jeff Bridges is still there. You know, that's one generation. You know, think about it for Gary Cooper and all of the older actors there. You go back one generation, and there are literally cowboys in that family tree, right? It's not like, you know, great grandpa was a cowboy, you know. For them, it was like, I can go talk to the cowboy in the family and get his perspective, you know. That's just what's wild about looking at the compression of things, because like how we usually study history in American schools anyway, is like you pull out an era of like 10 to 20 years and be like, yeah, let's go look at those 10 to 20 years. And it's like, yeah, dude. And then if you look at what's adjacent to that, you know, like Civil War almost led directly into like the Wild West expansion era, and there is considerable overlap, right? But they don't always talk about how that overlaps, because, you know, you can just think about that, like Tombstone, for example. It's like, think about the states that they're in and where they're talking about. In True Grit, it actually comes out a couple of times, but very briefly, that it's like, oh yeah, this guy was a Confederate, this guy fought for the Union, you know, and whatever, and they're still dealing with those ramifications. Like, that's not ancient history for them, you know. And so when you study it, though, there's not always talk about how these eras blend into each other because of the march of time. You try and just snapshot those 10 or 20 years, and, you know, Westerns, they covered a big span. You know, it's American expansion, you know, West, you know, especially in and around and certainly after, you know, the Civil War and all of that. all at the same time, so
it certainly is an interesting slice of history. Like, just looking at little factoids, Wyoming was the first state to allow women to vote, and in some way it was to draw women to move to Wyoming. And like, so there's a lot of the western like frontier states that did that really early, as all of these reasons that they needed to fill the population. And so they started giving out land, giving out amenities and things like that. I don't know. I like, one of the reasons I asked for us to do the westerns, I kind of do want to know more about what everything was. Also, it's fun, and also like how it affects cinema as history and all of the things I'm consuming now and not realizing it. And I want to understand the tropes better. But it helps me put into perspective actual things of like what and when and how things happened.
Right. Well, and I mean, you're talking about giving out land. That was something that always stuck with me too, just for the period. It's like studying U.S. history in high school, and like for the AP courses. So we got a little bit into it, but it's like there was a unit where they talk about the land grants they would give, and it's like you're like, oh yeah, they give you land, and it's like, cool, you can see all this land, and we'll be able to cabin on it. That's probably the perspective you have, but it's like it just undersells the sheer freaking amount of land that they had in comparison to the population, that they just gave like huge swaths of land. We're talking like hundreds of acres, if not more, where it's like, think about your average house now is built on like a quarter acre, average, some are smaller, some up to an acre or more. And you can certainly get in some places where you can still get land, but it's like hundreds of acres is just like, that was still a pretty small plot, and some of that is just like after generations of, like, well, I've got 4 sons and we're going to divide the land evenly. And then they've got 4 sons. And, you just get down to these, manageable, normal kind of plots of land that we're used to seeing, compared to like, it's like, oh yeah, we're just going to give that guy half of Wyoming and we're going to give that guy half of Nevada. And like just huge.
Nuke it. Yeah, right. I mean, the land is still empty. Wyoming still has less than 1 million population, I think, or maybe just at. It's
relatively so small that at this point, the other places have grown so much faster, it wouldn't qualify to be a state. That's how few people live there, constitutionally speaking. But the grand wide open and the exploration and the necessity of virtue to settle the land. That's a huge part of westerns.
The brutality of the life.
What was that?
It's the kind of the brutality of the life, and like the line that keeps coming back to me is from Bone Tomahawk of the woman. It's like, this is why frontier life is hard, because people are fucking idiots, and just, like, not only is the elements trying to kill you, they're generally poor. They have to depend on something to come in from other places where they have food and water. Anything that they don't have, they're gonna just have to be without. And if that means water, then they're fucked. And then when people are idiots, as people are going to be, everything is just so hard. The mortality rate was so high. The injuries were already higher than normal because they might not have a doctor anywhere.
Sure.
Well, and the medicine wasn't that advanced anyway.
Yeah, so it might have been better in a city, but it certainly was not good out in the country.
Yeah, I think we're even still a couple of decades away from you've got demons in your blood, you should do cocaine about it, which was, how they would treat certain things, but that didn't, I don't think that started until like the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then they started bottling that and selling it on the shelf. But
they already did have
like, yeah, well, yeah, opium had been around for a while. Cocaine was relatively new. So cocaine's one of those new world things that, that we got. So I don't know. So High Noon overall, like the movie, especially for an older flick. Like the music was fantastic, it's definitely one of those that kind of sticks with you. The gunfight, super fun. Certainly it's got pacing issues from like a modern perspective, right? Like you're just literally, this guy is walking around the town the entire time. That's not really usually the exciting parts of the story, but the drama of trying to see who's going to help him and back him up and that sort of thing.
And everyone being very reasonable as to why they're not helping.
Right. Well, and it's funny too, because it's like the clock almost becomes a character as well, right? It becomes an important part of the plot, if nothing else. And so it's like 24 for cowboys, except it's like 2 hours till high noon, and so like every time he's in a new building,
which was a pretty bold way to do pacing. I gotta say, that's for films that's unusual. And theoretically, that's kind of in drama theory. Back to Aristotle, who said that a good story has to be in one place in one 24-hour period. But that's not how movies were even then. So that's playing with time like that and a ticking clock. I agree, was very effective. Did you see the trivia that apparently every scene has a clock in it?
I didn't realize it was that pronounced, but yeah, that's
it's a deliberate choice by the director,
right?
And the weird thing is,
there are definitely some scenes where it's like as he's leaving, you hear the tick, 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 tick. Right. He's got it in the back of his head. Time's a wasting, So,
to say nothing of the fact that apparently, the this story this movie was made for nothing. This is like. I think a great example of the studio system that still working. People give the studio system a lot of guff, but it worked, right? This kind of machine-produced, forgettable movie earned Oscars and acclaim and became a classic of the genre, defining it for generations. And it was just sort of like a script from a cheap story thrown together last minute just to fulfill a contract. And produced this. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Just cut the time. If we're going to talk about any other movies today, we should probably get a move
on.
Oh,
yeah, of course. Sorry.
We should get along, little doggy. But
I mean, it's okay, a little boring. Just,
Yeah.
All right. Who gets picked on next?
Go, Gadget, random. There you go. We're way through our 1 minute moratorium. So
this was the best movie on the list, right? Everybody?
No.
Yeah, good. No. Oh.
It was the most brutal movie on the list, and that's compared to Tombstone, for example. So, like,
I mean, I think I would have picked. It was like that's what I ended up because that's like the one I've rewatched the most, and I think it is a Western, and I thought it's a good movie. But my choices were like some old spaghetti Western of some variety with Bud Spencer and Terrence Hill because I enjoy those, but I didn't really know if they were worth picking. Django Unchained, or I also really liked the Magnificent Seven, the 2016 version. That's the only one I watched. So and then I ended up picking Django because I forgot to pick one, and Ben pinged me, and I was like, "Oh yeah, Django."
Well, I mean,
so why is it
you
the
call
best?
it a Western, but I mean, I just want to put it up front. The Tarantino apparently calls it a Southern instead of a Western, which might be more accurate.
Can't get bent. Like it says it's a Western.
That's silly.
That's not what IMDb says. That's Andreas's rebuttal. Good one. So, yeah.
Tarantino's a weirdo who wants to be unique and special.
Yes.
But he makes good movies because he's a weirdo.
I mean, I think the point is that the movie takes place entirely in the South, right? We're not out on the frontier at any point, really.
I thought that's what they did in their winter of learning how to shoot. They were out west, then they go back,
out and about, and making.
I mean, I think they made it as west as Texas. Like maybe
those mountains look particular.
No, I mean for sure, but I don't recall anything indicating exactly where they were during those mountains. Just that they were hunting bad guys during that time. But
have you guys seen Magnificent Seven? Would that have been a better pick?
We're not quibbling about that, right? The picks are the picks, whatever. We want to know why you picked this one, what makes you love it so much, and then we'll beat you up about it. I mean, or whatever. We'll talk about it.
I think the acting is great. I think the story is good and compelling and interesting. I think it's action packed, but there's still like good moments. I especially love Dr. Schultz.
Oh yeah,
as a character, and the actor who plays Dr. Schultz, he's so good.
Fellow Swissman like yourself, by the way. So,
do you speak German at all? I know you're Danish. Do you speak German at all?
We have German in school, but I didn't really take it. So
they haven't had to worry about it so much since World War II.
Ich spreche keine Deutsch. I can do a little bit of German.
He speaks pig German, so you know.
No, that was it's just I don't know that I can't converse in German, but I might be able to guess what they're saying maybe.
Right. No, I mean, like, there are excellent aspects of Django, and like, to me, I was thinking, definitely some of my favorite bits out of the movies that we watched come from Django, right? There's many great scenes that are by themselves, but then they're definitely weighed by the brutality of the movie in a variety of ways, right? Like we were focused in on the language a little bit in the pre-show and that sort of thing, but it's like, bro, you all but literally watch a dude get eaten by dogs, like, wholesale. That's freaking brutal.
It like a dark time in American history as well, and I feel like a lot of especially the classic westerns, just really try to whitewash like that era.
Well, I mean, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, right? In many of these cases, the stories that we have are being told by the victor, more or less, right? The guy who lived, he's furthering his legend. So yeah, absolutely, he's gonna paint himself as the good, virtuous guy that sells better, etc. Like Wyatt Earp is a good example, right? Like there's a lot of indication that Wyatt Earp was just as dirty and rotten as the guys that he was supposedly hunting down. And right, Wyatt Earp survived, but the other piece of Wyatt Earp's story that I think is compelling is like a lot of his biggest exploits actually come from people that he shot. Like the river sequence, for example, like that one supposedly came from like one of the dudes that he gunned down in the river actually survived for a little bit, and he's like, that MFer just walked out into the river and shot like 12 dudes at point blank range. Like that's a thing that the guy who got shot said, right? So that's a pretty good witness at that point. But like I think you run into those instances where like Django definitely plays up the like harsh reality of what was going on, at the time, but that doesn't make the movie less brutal, right? I'm not saying it's invalid. It's the same thing, same stance I take with Game of Thrones, right? It's all well and good that this shit has happened in reality, but that doesn't necessarily make for good entertainment.
I think that's a little bit what's sick about Quentin Tarantino is that it's supposed to make for good entertainment. This is what he likes, and it is his entire everything he does is based pretty much on exploitation movies of the 70s. It's what he liked as a kid. That's what he wants to make. So there's a bit of voyeurism there. Now, I do think in Django Unchained, he is trying to show slavery as brutal, and the gun violence is fun. Because it's trying to be this whole revenge picture. And that's why I'd have to maybe state, maybe this is the obvious part, but that's why the movie is the way it is. Because it's supposed to be this big old revenge picture. And so because you're supposed to enjoy the lady of the house getting pulled back by a rope, her back is about to break when he gets
say goodbye to Miss Laura.
Right. Right. So you're supposed to enjoy that, but you're not supposed to enjoy threats of rape and the whipping and the balls being cut off and everything.
The guy getting torn apart by dogs, the like human water balloons that
you're supposed to enjoy Quentin Tarantino exploding.
Right.
That's supposed to be fun.
Yeah. Which I mean, there's some self-commentary there and things underneath it all, right? Like, he's got no problem gunning down the random slavers, even though there's no profit in it, because underneath it all, he's, initially driven by the fact that they're bounty hunters until it's time to go get his wife. Now he's got the means to go free his wife and everything like that. But yeah, so yeah, I don't hate Django, but it is definitely a tough watch. I don't think you should just sit down and love every minute of it, right? And I don't think that's the point. I think it's just worth bringing up, right? Like certainly there is historical context and that sort of thing, but like if you want to get into the history of it, go get into the history of it. Don't watch Django. Like that might show you some of it. Even the gunfights, though, like in many cases, like it's gratuitous, right? Like maybe it's happened, maybe it's whatever, but it is always a little over the top, right?
Yeah, sure.
You know, so it's just
over the top. But I think personally, I think this movie has the best acting. Like, it's very subjective, right? But I think everybody played like super well, and were really like how much how likable is Samuel Jackson usually, like, and how fucking despicable is he in this movie?
right.
For example,
They made him look so old, and he was hamming it up even past that, you know. So yeah, no, it's a good movie and it's interesting, but I definitely enjoy the earlier parts, right? The earlier tropes are almost more Western with
like
with
first,
Dr. Scholes, right?
Yeah,
So
it's like,
yeah,
and then it moves more into. I mean, I guess it's still set in the same setting, right? But it's more of a revenge slave centric movie. Where the first part is more, I would say, more classical Western.
sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's.
Don't hate the movie. It's just not gonna go like, oh man, it's Saturday. What should we watch? You know.
I do not enjoy this movie. I have seen it twice, and I'm never gonna watch it again. I don't enjoy it. I think Tarantino movies are kind of hit and miss with me. Like I enjoyed Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think I enjoyed Pulp Fiction. I've seen Kill Bill, but it was so long ago. I don't want to do the math on how many years it's been because it'll make me feel old. But it's like otherwise it's just sometimes the over the top gratuitousness can be really funny, and there are things that I really like in other things. Like if I call anything it was too absurd to enjoy, well, that I enjoy the absurdity of like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which so fucking weird that I can't say that is a criticism. Why didn't I like this movie? It's hard to say. I didn't particularly enjoy a lot of the acting. Like Jamie Foxx, I felt was very wooden. I didn't really care about him. Christoph Waltz has so much charisma that his character, even though it's a type that I find annoying, was okay. Like it's a credit to him how much I enjoyed that character. But I mostly enjoyed just how ridiculous DiCaprio was. And then when he's gone, I don't care. I didn't care about anything else. Like, why was there another half hour of the movie? I was just waiting for it to end.
Yeah, we had to get the fake out ending, right? So, oh no, our hero has been defeated and captured for 15 minutes until he just rides back in and burns the whole place down anyway. And I was like, couldn't we have just done that in the first place? You know,
yeah,
so.
I think the same about there too. I was like, couldn't we?
Yeah.
I think because I think the Christoph Waltz character is supposed to be the real stand-in for Quentin Tarantino. I can't shake the hand of a slaver.
It was so much of a contrivance at that point. It's just like, can I fucking? Why am I watching this movie? Fuck you, Andreas.
I just feel like he had enough. Like Waltz's character, like
he finally got pushed too far. Yeah, I definitely recall watching that scene last night and watching his arm wave around because I'm waiting for the armature to come out because I had seen the movie already, right? And so I'm just like, bro can totally shake his hand without shooting him, right? It's a deliberate choice at this point, you know, and then finally just kind of does it. And then like even still, the way that it happens, everyone's like, wait a minute. Did he just get blasted? You know, because he uses a
Derringer. One thing I didn't like is that pistol has two shots. He fired one. He turned around, had time to shoot the guy who was most likely to shoot him right in front of him, and he didn't do it, and just said, "I could not do it." That's like one like logical pitfall I didn't like because this guy's very pragmatic.
Right.
He would have shot that guy or tried to.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that falls under contrivance, right? That's just one of those where it's like we want him to die the tragic hero now, you know, for Django, and Django can have the rest of his story. He can finally come into his own without, you know, having his mentor, you know, lord it over him or whatever. So and you kind of see that in the slaver bits too, right? I guess, you know, where it's like he uses all the little tricks that he was taught along the way about making up his story. It's plausible. He's got the information. He's got corroborating witnesses, etc. You know, so that's how he's able to escape. But it's like, just for a moment, if we suspend all that and say, like, if that had just been cut out of the movie, like, would it have changed much? You know, like, does it really enrich the movie to have this 15-minute side journey of him go blow up some Australian slavers, you know, like.
Which, by the way, Australian slavers, was that a thing? I don't know the history too well.
They're a bunch of criminals anyway.
Yeah. Australian slavers in the South, you know, like the German part makes sense, right? Like there were definitely the Germans running around, and, you know, like his history shows like a lot of them had anti-slavery mentality, right? All of that stuff totally fine with. But yeah, the Australian bit was just, that was like Quentin Tarantino's like, shit, I'm not in this movie. Hold on a second, you know? And again, like, I think it does show you some of Django's character, but it probably could have been shown a different way, you know, without having this pretend sub journey of, you know, well, he's been captured. Bummer, you know, I don't know. Yeah, didn't hate it, you know, not a favorite, but, you know, it's, to me, it's a very good movie. The casting's on point. I feel like the acting's on point. I think Jamie Foxx hams it up in a couple of places, but I think that's also kind of the point, you know. I don't know.
I don't think he's a bad actor. I just think, like, I feel objectively the statement is, if it was a better actor, I would have enjoyed it more. But like, there was not enough to the character for me to care about him somehow. But like, to compare him to Christoph Waltz is like, that is a character that's probably I would find grating, but he was okay because Waltz. And so that's like, if it had someone else like Denzel Washington or something, like I probably would have enjoyed it more. But it's just like,
why is Waltz's character the problem? Like,
it's just that he feels like kind of condensed into the, well, actually, and I found that annoying over time. I like when I first watched this movie a long time ago, it was okay. He was probably the best part of it, but not, like, watching it again, it's like but well, actually, every time is just, that was becoming more annoying.
Okay.
So
I didn't catch it, but
it's
right.
It's the same behavior that he has of everything. Like, now you get the sheriff because he can do this, but it's the marshal one that's gonna, like, there was the sheriff that he had to kill, and the marshal had to come then pay him the $200. But he's just like, because he's the oh so good mastermind of everything. It's like, he knows every little point of what needs to happen, and he's so perfect up until he contrives himself to death.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I thought that scene was great, to be honest, to be like, you know, get through the entire explanation. So, but, you know, since this is a tick for you now, we've got to say it. So actually, I think you owe me $200. Like,
I think, so no, the two big bounty things I think are just because it's a slave revenge picture. It's the slave revenge movie, just like the Holocaust revenge movie was, whatever, you know, Inglourious Basterds.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So this is the slave revenge movie. The reason they got shot is because Quentin Tarantino wanted to shoot racists, and in the Deep South, while slavery was still legal. And all what you're talking about is actually just another level of contrivance. His character was built around that. The motivation was built around that. Being able to just shoot the racist sheriff and the racist slave drivers and the racist other slave drivers.
Well, it's the South. Everybody was racist, right? So,
well, that's, you know, except for Schultz, you get to shoot everybody. You get to shoot all the white people, plus Samuel L.
He didn't shoot everybody. He didn't shoot the marshal. He didn't shoot the 25 dudes with guns on the thing. He shot the sheriff.
True.
He shot the sheriff, but he didn't shoot the deputy. So
that's a thought I had while watching these movies. Were like, did anybody just get to, like, basically sign up to be a marshal or sheriff?
Yes. Well, but that's another thing. That's another thing that, like, Tombstone shows and a few other places, right? It's like, if you go through the history for some of these characters, and why I kind of bring up the fact that it's like, you should not ignore the shadow of the Civil War, that, you know, and where that falls for some of these guys. A lot of these guys were like, they were, you know, they were officers for the South, and then they became bandits, or they were officers and then they became marshals and then they became bandits, or like, that line is very fluid for a lot of these characters. And so I think it's in Tombstone that they basically talk, you know, that it's like, just because you got a badge doesn't make you right. And there are definitely characters, there are definitely people that wearing the badge was basically just like government sanctioned gang membership, right? Which might resonate with some other people these days for different reasons that we're totally not going to get into. But like there are a lot of instances where, you know, people were the law, then they were, you know, private businessmen, then they were bandits, then they might have been the law again. And so like you see a flavor of that for Django. Like I watched Django last, right? So to me it just kind of builds through the narrative of these different movies. But I think a True Grit, it's like that too. Like dude was like a ranger, or no, the Matt Damon's character was the ranger, right? And then he becomes a marshal and basically a glorified bounty hunter, you know. So that it's really interesting that these guys like pick up and sit down jobs that may or may not include banditry at some point and robbery, you know, and then just like they take their money and go do a different job, you know. So
I mean, Rooster was a bandit. Like he said that, right? He never robbed anybody from their possessions or watches or whatever, but he did rob like banks or stagecoach or something of that nature. I think he said.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you get a lot of that. So like throughout these movies, like if you dig a little deeper, right, you know, all of these movies, like it's all the good guys and whatever, but like if you dig a little bit deeper, all of these guys were bastards or bandits or robbers at some point somewhere, you know. And certainly from a perspective, right, you know, because it's like if you take a little bit of a step back from like the cowboys, you know, in Tombstone, for example, like, you know, yeah, sure, they're definitely bandits and a bunch of bastards and whatever, but I think some of them felt an air of legitimacy, and they even talk about at one point when they're getting docked to the farm, that it's like, you know, oh, they're wearing badges now, like the cowboys are wearing badges now, you know, to try and legitimize their thing. And Wyatt Earp is kind of like forsaken his law duty because he's now on his vengeance ride, you know, and he's got his posse hunting down as many of them as we can. So yeah,
we keep
might as well sliding into it.
I think we should save Tombstone because E.G. might show up.
Right, but
we've got
talking
15
about
minutes, so yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's only so much time left, but yeah, I mean, to me, Tombstone's one of my favorites on this list, right? Like I might have picked it if it hadn't been picked already, but definitely learned some things this last time going around, you know, through the trivia and some other things where it's like, I want to pick up this book they mentioned in the trivia. It was Heldorado, because basically that's the one that it's like it starts accusing Wyatt Earp of like being, you know, a pimp and a gangster and a gambler and all of this stuff. The gambling thing, whatever. He was a legitimate gambler, supposedly, right? He was the guy, the card shark at the Oriental, so that's not a stretch. But yeah, supposedly historians have corroborated some of the accusations that are levied in this book. But that notwithstanding, come on, Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday has got to be like one of my favorite characters in Westerns ever. Like, he doesn't say hardly anything, but every line of his is memorable, just about, you know, up to and including, like, you see him, right, a couple of times into the movie. And then when, you know, when Wyatt Earp goes to the Oriental and slaps the shit out of the card dealer there, and then dude comes back with a shotgun and he's going to get him some street vengeance. And then it's like, oh, I'm sorry. Are you still here? You may go. It's just like everything. I don't know. Doc Holliday is one of those. He's an improbable character. He's always perfect. I don't know why the director doesn't hate him, but maybe because he's also sick. So he's perfect. Plus he is
an embodiment of flaws tied up with a bunch of dandy class to be insulting. I love that.
Yeah.
He was great. The Tombstone movie is basically about him, in my opinion.
It is not, but he definitely steals the show.
It's an ensemble cast, kind of. I think it is. It's about him and Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp are the main guys in the legend and in the movie. But it is supposed to be kind of an ensemble cast.
I think Cody has a fair point. I still would say this is a Western, and it's a very good movie. And I think it's the best. That one or Django is the best one. But I would say I was pleasantly surprised by all these. But I think Cody has a fair point in chat that it's kind of a 90s action movie dressed up as a Western.
So here's the problem with that, right?
Not much action.
It's fucking true. that's the thing. Like of all the movies that we watched, Tombstone's the closest to the mark to actually being based off of true events. Now, I'm not going to say that they didn't dress it up. I'm not going to say that some of the action wasn't over the top and that sort of thing. But like the shootout at the OK Corral, as it's called anyway, you know, basically that back lot, that shit happened, and it largely happened in the way that they said. There's been so much analysis, there's been so much checking into it, especially because in a lot of cases, like the guys who did this should have been gunned down, right? Like Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, all of them, they were outclassed, they got the drop on them, all of this stuff, even though they kind of went looking for a fight, they should have died there, and basically didn't even get touched. And as the movie, you know, correctly frames, like in a lot of tellings of the shootout of the OK Corral, they always end there, right? But one of the things that Tombstone did differently is that they that was the middle point, that was the escalating point, right? And then you definitely see, like I had already mentioned, you know, Wyatt Earp's you know, vengeance ride, but also that scene in the river where he basically, like, you know, runs up to the leader of Hydra and shoots him point blank range with a double barrel shotgun. That happened. And I'm confident in saying that because one of the victims in that fight scene said, "Oh my God, did you fucking see it?" You know, like he's on his deathbed basically saying, like, you know, that guy pulled off some ridiculous feat. So it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's sure, it's over the top and it's you know, actiony and that sort of thing, but by many accounts it happened. You know, like it's crazy. And I think that's probably as much as why Tombstone gets all the focus that it does. Like Tombstone, the shootout at the OK Corral, all of that stuff is because it's not plausible legend. It's verifiable by, you know, by multiple accounts and that sort of thing. So I don't know, but those are all great things. That's not why I love the movie. I mean, Doc Holliday is why I love the movie. Kurt Russell, I love the movie. Yeah. Like the casting is fantastic.
Yeah,
you know, just all the way around.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so, I had no idea Michael Biehn was in this movie. And it's like that. Right? That is an actor who deserved a lot more success. He deserved to be in a lot more movies. In every movie he's been in that I've seen, that I think I loved. So
have you seen his British version of Taken movie?
No.
Kind of like he's like a revenge movie. It's like, I'll find it for you guys later. It's surprisingly good. It's just like a pensioner in the UK that like goes on a revenge kick, and it's like actually quite good.
Michael Biehn,
pretty sure, or Kane. Wait, what's his name?
Mr. Bean.
Oh, you might. Yeah, you're thinking Kane maybe for sure. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. But
yeah.
And I'm talking about the guy that was in Terminator and Aliens, that like childhood movies.
Right. Yeah, Bean. He's the fastest gun cowboy, right?
Yeah, he was Revolver Ocelot in this movie.
He's Doc Holliday's foil, you know, in a lot of ways, and that was a contrivance in the movie, right? They got it almost nearly correct, as near as like historically verifiable, but that guy was basically found, and for all accounts, to me it looks like suicide, right? They basically heard a gunshot, dude's horse had run off with his boots, and he was holding the gun, you know, like in his hand still, you know, so it's like, unless somebody got up on him, whereas like in the movie we have to have the duel, right, between the two anti-heroes, I guess, because it's like, yeah, I mean, Doc Holliday's kind of on the side of good right then, but I wouldn't call him the hero even in that scene, you know, so but yeah, I don't know. I mean, that sequence is great. There's so much subtlety, I think, to the filming and just their body language, and
all of the mustaches were authentic and forced to be grown. They did not have fake mustaches, which I appreciated.
Right. Yeah, and I think another thing that goes into this, right, is it's all but shadow directed by Kurt Russell, right? And so kind of what I was saying last time, or at least in a previous week, I just think that Kurt Russell wishes that he was a cowboy, and so he spends a lot of time, you know, in that genre with those types of characters. And Tombstone, you know, might have been his magnus opus in that case, or you know, where it's just like, this is me, this is putting all of my stuff in it, you know, and keeping it together. So
He certainly does seem to be in Western or Western adjacent things, even something as ridiculous as like Escape from New York or Escape from LA. It's like they do have that kind of feel. And the Snake Plissken characters in Metal Gear Solid and then Revolver Ocelot, it just feels like this is all circular to me. Of like, sorry, spam phone calls won't stop. But Kurt Russell seems to be in like Western and Western adjacent media that then is like feeding back into itself, and all of which I've enjoyed.
Right.
So.
Right. I mean, we could easily. I'd be perfectly happy to just be like, let's go watch 5 Kurt Russell movies.
Yes.
Like, you know, and we're almost there anyway. We've got. Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, because it's like we've already watched The Thing. Now we've seen Tombstone. You know, so.
But we haven't seen the best Kurt Russell movie yet.
Guardians of the Galaxy 2?
No.
Yeah. Right.
Go Big ahead. Trouble in Little China.
All right. Did we not watch that as a perfect movie? So,
no.
Did we? No, I don't think so.
No.
Dang.
I've never seen this movie.
I missed my opportunity then. No. Really? What? Oh my God. Okay. So this is happening, and that's the first movie on the list then. Okay. So
it is the best Kurt Russell movie.
So then just to get the director hooked a little bit, we could talk about how he's not even the hero. So
yeah. Big true. He's just the guy who's there.
I don't ascribe to that, but I figured it would get her hooked. So
I don't know. I don't know if that's exactly the thing that I like about it, but like out of Westerns, it feels like to me, one of the reasons I'm enjoying them so far is that they feel like noir, but not in a city. The frontier country is a character in itself in the way that a city is a character in the noir, like Chinatown or the way Hogwarts is. It's just like it feels like it's the same thing, but it's just in a different setting.
A lot of it comes out of that kind of post-war malaise, right? You know, there's one narrative, World War II, that everyone, you know, we're the good guys, we won, great. But after World War II, there's a real exhaustion, and a lot of war veterans who saw hell, right? And they're not fooled by anything. They're get pretty cynical, and a lot of those old detectives were strongly affected, or their characters were strongly affected by the war, either the First World War or the Second, or both. So, and plus you had the Great Depression in the middle. So these Westerns that we're looking at really grow out of that and those tropes. That's High Noon in particular, but then a lot of these others are kind of reactions to that. And so
noir grew out
they have a common
post-war
source.
malaise, and so it could just be contemporary growing, and that the general audience was happy for it. And I'm in both.
Hadn't considered it, but yeah, I'm definitely feeling a lot of vibes that overlap, right? You know, like certainly the setting is somewhat different, but
yeah, No Country for Old Men feels like a noir just in Texas to me.
Well, yeah, I was going to say 3:10 to Yuma was basically Old Country for No Men the way it was remade, but maybe that's a super hot take.
I've not seen No Country for Old Men, but
I
did find 3:10 to Yuma surprisingly good.
I don't know if it's a hot take, but like No Country for Old Men was a lot more brutal, so it stuck out to me in different ways than 3:10 to Yuma did. Like 3:10 to Yuma, like I don't know. I mean, yeah, there you go. I was like, we should switch over, right? So
yeah.
Surprise to me for a couple of reasons, right? Like it's been on my backlog for a while, you know, and whatever, but I'm not like a huge Western fan in general. Like Westerns are more like, there are movies that I like than I like, you know, just the whole genre and whatever.
I would say I'm in the same kind of camp.
But yeah, like 3:10 to Yuma, like to me, it's more like they captured Doc Holliday, and you know, they just captured a guy who was like super charismatic. Whereas, like, you know, the bad guy in No Country for Old Men is cold and brilliant,
alien,
and fucking scary. You know, like you know, there's some wild differences there. But I mean, at some point maybe we should talk about why you think they're similar. But
I should just do a Coen Brothers movie list.
I would probably go there partially because 3:10 to Yuma. With 3:10 to Yuma, you have Russell Crowe, and Russell Crowe. The characters wake up and see Russell Crowe beating a man to death with a rock.
Yeah.
and even when they catch him, he doesn't stop.
He doesn't beat him,
and he throws an old man off a cliff. He's a cold-blooded killer. Right. So I thought I was watching Old Country for Old Men in the West, and then the last third of the movie was, why would this monster act like this? It wasn't. Yeah. He seems to be an honorable guy. He's clearly a killer. He knows he's a killer. He's a miserable man. He hates everything. He wants to see the world burn, and then all of a sudden he has a soft spot because this guy's kid.
I would say you get the impression through the whole movie that he lives by his own code and his own ideals, and he has a code and ideals, and the guy he hit within those lines with the kid.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from too, Ben, right? Like you're talking about him being a cold-blooded killer. He definitely murders these guys, when they're
that's the point, right? I don't know.
Well, yeah, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to set it up so I can flip the script on you a little bit, and why I didn't have the same take, and so he's definitely ambushing these guys basically, even though he's in handcuffs and he's there in the midst of, I think it starts out with 4 or 5 of them and obviously starts dwindling, right? But to flip the take, like it's the kind of talk where you run into with the whole look, man, if you're captured and they're going to threaten to kill you, you might as well die fighting, in my opinion, right? Like that's a take I've often had. And so very likely from his perspective, they are taking him to hang him. And if he doesn't fight them off, they're going to succeed. He's hoping his gang's going to catch up and whatever, but along the way he's going to thin them out and rely on them being the good guys so that he can get this job done. But no, you're right though. I mean, it is brutal, especially that first scene with The Rock and everything like that is one of the more brutal scenes in the movie. But to me, like it didn't necessarily strike me as he wasn't American Psycho, right? He wasn't just
with The Rock.
He kills the kid who's whistling about, like in the morning they're gonna hang me.
The guy that took his horse.
The asshole guy who burned
the one who burned down the barn.
That's not a rock. He kills him with a fork.
He took the fork from the family dinner. Yeah, it was.
Was a rock? Okay, it was a fork. It was a fork.
Yeah, it was a fork instead.
Very much changed the tone of the conversation, Andre.
No. I couldn't find out who you were talking about. Like, pretty sure it was the guy.
I guess I just thought it was a rock. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, he brutally kills this kid and everything like that, but. I'm just saying from everything else that he talks about, right? Like, I mean, I guess we could take the stance that he's the kind of psychotic that you see, Jason Bateman, where he's he's got the fake smiles and that sort of thing. But at no point did I get that impression. It's more like, he's relatively authentic. And then, he just has these underlying brutal this brutal energy that he can use, right? And especially because halfway through the movie, as you pointed out, it changes tone, right? Certainly once they get to wherever the town was that they're catching the train, escapes me right now. But once they get there,
Continental or something, it was a very odd
something,
name.
But. Yeah, but he basically just sits back and lets his gang take care of it, But again, the ending, spoiler alert, maybe don't listen to this part just in case. He turns on his gang, right, in a very cold-blooded way. And
why?
I agree with you. That was out of character to me.
I don't think so. Because
they violated his code. He says no before they shoot. He tries to stop him. He doesn't stop. And in his eyes, then he went over. I don't disagree with you guys that it seems I was like whoa, but I can see where the character is. And that moment he's really angry. He's very reactionary to his anger as well, right? The same with the guy at the start who gets captured. It's just you gotta go, kid. You fucked up.
Yeah.
But I would say in general he lives by this code, right? He tries to he robs the railroads. He's got a thorn in the side on those guys. They have a lot of money. He wants that. He doesn't really. It seems like he doesn't want to take from normal people. The rancher, he's here, leave your horses up here. He left the horses there, like they said. They're he has this he's this brutal Robin Hood kind of vibe on him. I don't think he really gives his money back, but he has that vibe, if you know what I mean.
I think so. They don't flat out say it, which I appreciate, because I think you could only crudely describe it as he thinks everyone is out for themselves, and so he's kind of surprised when they're not, and he doesn't quite understand it. He also doesn't respect anyone who he can bully and manipulate, and so when there's someone he can't, I think it's intriguing. And then it's the Christian Bale character is kind of the parent that he never had, and he actually respects that.
Oh, that's what it was.
I think so, because that's what at the last section of the movie was talking about. Like, you're trying to do this to just be a hero to your son. It's like, no, I'm not a hero to my son, because I was only in retreat and my foot got shot off by my own side. You try to have your son look up to you once you tell him that story, as well as like, I'll give you $1,000 if you just walk out of the room, and then I'll just go away with my gang. It never needs to happen. And think of what $1,000 would do. It's like, but then when Christian Bale's character is laying out, like, how do I explain how I have this money and that you're gone?
Right.
And it's like he was laying out all of the reasons why that's wrong, or like it wouldn't work. It's not even a good offer. And then when Christian Bale's having the talk with the Pinkerton guy of, I'll get him onto the train, but you're going to take my kid and you're going to go back to my family and you're going to pay them $1,000 for this. He was driving a hard bargain. He was standing up for himself and his family. And I think the Russell Crowe character really appreciated that and cared about it. It's like, okay, someone I can feel like a connection to and an equal. And so he wanted to get on the train with the guy. And so he was happy to go to Yuma and break out for the third time. He had that conversation of like, I've been there and I've escaped twice. This isn't permanent. And even Christian Bale was like, I don't care. I just need the money so that you get on that train. And
he's gonna get off before he even gets to Yuma. The horse, like in the end, there. Like, that's...
Yeah, but
so it ends up just being an endless gyre of violence. I guess sort of that he's a hero. And it's Western. If my theory about the morality and manliness is right about Westerns, it fits that. But it ends up, a lot of people die and nothing ends up happening other than the gang's dead, because the gang leader is just going to escape again like he always does. And you're supposed to cheer it on.
I don't know
I don't know
what he's
about
doing
that,
is taking care of that family that he now cares about.
Maybe. But the other thing I want to get in here too, though, is I'm sensing a better parallel now that we're talking about it as well. Is like, I watched 3:10 to Yuma before. Like, I think High Noon was my second to last, or maybe third to last, whatever. But 3:10 to Yuma was, I think, my first one that I watched. And there's a lot of parallel between Christian Bale's character and the sheriff in High Noon. Like, they both basically find their support dry up and are faced with this gang of murderers that just by themselves, more or less, right? And so there's some interesting moralizing there. But yeah, like, so again, I mean, did you watch a lot of these movies? Did you find out that there was a happy ending in several of them? Because I think in a lot of movies, like they almost just become a slice of life, not in the sense that it's like, oh, well, we're going to sit down and have some home cooking. Like, this is just life. This is life on the frontier. This is the life of a marshal, bounty hunter, revenge murderer, right? There's not a lot of happy endings from what we watched. I guess you could say, True Grit kind of ends with a happy ending from a perspective, but like, yeah. 3:10 to Yuma, like nobody wins. And towards your point, like there's a lot of waste in the sense that even from his perspective, he just kills his entire gang. And to me, like, that was such a wild thing, because that guy worshipped him, right? And had spent the entire movie trying to catch up with him just to get gunned down by his own boss, at the end.
He was a great character, by the way.
Yeah, Ben Foster is another actor that I feel like he deserves more success and to be in more movies.
Right. So...
But yeah, like, I thought 3:10 to Yuma was like way better than I thought it was gonna be.
I completely forgot Alan Tudyk was in it. Like, completely blanked that he was in there.
You're gonna say we should have Alan Tudyk Day, because he's been in a couple movies recently, hasn't he? We were talking about Serenity.
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem is a lot of his recent movies is he's voicing some animal for some reason. He needs more face roles. Like, it's all well and good that he's getting work. Like, I appreciate that and stuff, but like, for the love of God, we can't record a chicken. Like why is he pretending to be a rooster or whatever for Moana and on and on and on. But yeah, I would rather see him in more face roles if we could, because I love the movies that he's in. Every time he shows up, he's a bright spot in that movie, so
he's the robot in Rogue
Yes.
That's well, right? Yeah.
Yeah. He ate K2. Yeah, K2SO, right? So, but yeah, you don't have to tell me. I know, but yeah, it was yeah, it was great to see him in this, but gets murdered, right? And this is another one of these two from like a pragmatic or utilitarian perspective, that it's like, how many more bodies do we got to throw on the pile of justice to get this one guy to justice? Yeah, I mean,
movie title.
Yeah, right. Very classic. It should have been in the 80s with like Chuck Norris and/or Schwarzenegger. Call it Pile of Justice. But yeah, I mean, because that's what it comes down to, right? Like, so many of these guys died for their morality, or in some cases just for their potential financial gain. That, like, even at the end of the day, the railroad guy was like, "Yep, I'm out." Like, this is now too much.
It does become like, that was the pragmatic thing to do if you want to live. But that was the Christian Bale. He knew that he was going to die. He was just wanting his kid to get out of it. And then his kid comes back with a herd of cows to help, and was actually really instrumental in getting him to the train. And like, there's also that quiet story of the father and son that don't see eye to eye to each other, but now they do, because they've been through something and they understand each other more. That in a way, it was a kind of that bittersweet happy ending. Christian Bale got what he actually cared about. His family is going to be taken care of. They're going to have water, and his son now respects him.
Right.
I would actually say, I'm not sure if the railroad is if he's gonna honor the promise. I think he's gonna try, but I don't know. But I do think Ben Wade was there to see that promise, and he would probably. I think he cared enough about the rancher and his family at this point to probably actually go enforce it. Because again, he has this code he seems to live by.
Yeah. Trying to one last thing I was going to say too, though, is like, you're talking about the railroad guy hiding, which was pragmatic. That could have made sense up to a point, but certainly a few minutes before that, right? They see the town sheriff or marshal or whoever and his two deputies basically get gunned down, more or less in cold blood as well. So at that point, it's like, you're in, dude. You might as well go through with it. Like, there's no way out.
Thinking about it, Ben Wade might also have been extremely cheesed off that all these people, his people hired to take out the people capturing him, almost killed him.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the Ben Foster guy, Charlie Prince, also said. It's like, no, don't shoot the guy in the black hat. And then he started shooting the people that he was hiring for it, because they were the morons. They were just going to shoot everybody moving, and they didn't care about who was they actually trying to save.
Which was a really interesting scene too. I'm glad you brought that up too, because it's like, you do have that where it's like very much the bad guys are trying to shoot the good guys, and then you've got the bad guy shooting the other people that he's hired to save his boss. And yeah, just a very chaotic and interesting thing, because it's like you could very clearly see his values through that, and it's like, yeah, I don't know. I didn't hate the movie. It's not like, I don't know if it's top 10 or anything like that. I think it was really solid. So
I thought it was a solid movie, and it was way more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. And Ben hated it. He's trying to.
It was just another depressing movie with. It was basically, it was structured like a horror movie, where you have a bunch of episodes, and every episode one person dies. Right.
Ben Wade's coming for you.
I mean,
and you have him with
you. The barn burner guy, and then there was the Peter Fonda died, and Tudyk, and yeah, it's like, I guess so. I mean, if you can force it into that lens, I just think you're missing forest for trees at that point.
No, I don't know. The big thing, I enjoyed it about as much as Old Country for Old Men, which is basically to say not at all. For the same reasons. I use the comparison because it's for the same reasons. That's really, really sad, I thought. Oh well.
I saw the trivia that they were originally trying to do with Tom Cruise and Eric Bana. I'm kind of glad that fell through.
Oh. Yeah.
I mean, I don't dislike either one of those. Tom Cruise does some pretty good stuff, but it's the level of charisma that both Russell Crowe and Christian Bale can bring, and the chemistry that they formed between each other was really, really good. And I think that if that failed, it wouldn't have worked as a movie.
I think it was really great.
Sure.
I do think Tom Cruise could have done a very good Ben Wade as well. I assume that's who he was going to play.
Yeah, I think he was. But Russell Crowe was the first pick, and so when Tom Cruise failed, then they put back to Russell Crowe.
Yeah, is he going to turn off his charisma and just play psycho Tom Cruise? Then maybe, so.
Jumping on the couch.
Cody's hot take is that
right.
Tom and Eric would have been better, and there's no question about it.
No, if you have millions of dollars, you can go finance that version.
Yeah.
Let's get to True Grit.
Yes, the actual best movie on this list. Come on now.
No, it's not the actual
Who's
best
with
movie
me?
on this list.
I
Yes,
think I
it
might
is.
be with you.
Yeah.
It was at least as good as High Noon.
No, so True Grit it's
Grit.
exactly what you want out of a Western, in my opinion. It has one of the best lines in cinema. I'm gonna say it. And if you wanted like an inoffensive, I want to watch a Western that represents the genre to me, that's True Grit, right? It doesn't take place in a town. We don't get our shootout at High Noon. But we get almost all the other tropes. It wanders. It's very character driven, and then at the very end, you've got your climax in the shootout. But there's so much more along the way, that would otherwise be like lost in the sauce. Like, what's her character? I want to call her Kate, but I'm not sure if that's the character
Maddie.
name. But Maddie, there you go. The little girl, and her bargaining is an essence of the movie itself, right? And just that the poor guy, who is also a fantastic actor for these scenes, like I am hooked in the scene, and just her bullying him. He's like, "Now wait a minute, I didn't agree to anything," and it's like, "That's cool. I'll just tell my lawyer then."
Do you guys watch Gilmore Girls?
I have.
No,
Isn't that's the prep school principal actor?
Oh, is it? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I should have looked him up. Like,
sure.
He's.
I
wouldn't mind seeing him in other stuff.
Many years,
but
yeah, that's fine.
She of course is Hawk Girl, or whatever we're gonna call her, Hawkeye's protege. So, but which is funny because
this
like
was
that's her first
role. Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this was her first movie, but yeah, so watching it in hindsight, like to me, it just made the casting even better, right? Because literally everybody in this is a name, pretty much, right? Even to the point where they got Jameson to be her lawyer,
So that was him.
Yes,
I was like, because
just the voice.
I didn't look him up, but like when we were listening to the voiceover, my husband turns to me, is that like the guy, the what's his face dude? I forgot what he had said, but one of his other characters, he just named him because I forgot the actor's name. It's like, maybe. And I wondered if he would show up in the movie. By the end of the movie, I'd forgotten to look it up. So cool.
Right. Yeah. And totally forgot Josh Brolin was the bad guy. Like he's just a subtle role. And, in 2010, we're not all looking forward to him being Thanos, and Deadpool 2 hadn't come out, and all of these other things.
He's almost not recognizable as well. Like,
right.
It took me a second. It's like, is that Brolin? It looks like, I'm not sure. Is it him? Like,
the Coen brothers do seem to like working with him, as they've put at least 3 movies with him that I can name,
including Old Country for Old Men, which you keep bringing up.
Yes.
Yeah. You should have just picked it then, Ben. Come on.
Cody's mad at you now, Justin.
We said no weird, not quite westerns. I would have done.
Yeah, Andreas.
We could do next week as a weird, not quite western.
It wasn't like with fantasy or like sci-fi. It was a western. It takes place in the.
I think I would make a case. I actually thought I didn't say this, that Django Unchained is a western, and I would view it as every time Django's in the West, he gets free and he brings the freedom back to the South. But I know Quentin Tarantino doesn't agree with that. But that's my take on it. I would justify it as the West liberates the South as a kind of movie. So there, it's a western. Done.
Yeah. Should we address the comment then real quick? Why I picked the remake. So yeah. I mean, honestly, I love them both, right? And I discussed that earlier. It could have been a coin flip for me. The quintessential scenes are largely the same, and to me that's a big selling point for the movie. I love John Wayne's version, just as much as anything, but I also love Jeff Bridges in this role, and I'm okay doing. Yeah, no, that's fine. There is a little bit of recency bias in the sense that I picked it because it's a more modern take on the thing. However, I'm also going to use some ex post facto justification in the sense that the 2010 True Grit is closer to the source material than John Wayne's version was. So, just saying, it's also the better representation of the story.
Right? Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges is a better Rooster Cogburn. John Wayne's a star. He's John Wayne. He's not a character.
John Wayne's the Rock.
John Wayne is a character, but that's the character John Wayne plays.
Correct. You're absolutely right.
I don't think that's
True Grit is John Wayne with an eye patch. It's not exactly, a difference in all his other John Wayne movies, which is part of why I don't like watching a lot of his war movies, is because I associate him with the Westerns, and I don't necessarily want to see a cowboy on the deck of a carrier somewhere, but that can be a hot take.
I'm not good at American accents, but was Matt Damon bad?
No, not really.
I don't think so.
He was okay.
It was just being weird. It wasn't. I wouldn't say it's a good Texan accent as a modern day Texan, but it was just him and his character being weird. I quite enjoyed that.
What weird? How?
But he's just a weird guy. It's like the constantly talking up of like, oh, I'm doing the Texas Rangers, and like I thought about stealing a kiss while you were asleep. It was a weird character. Like when he gets off the horse and they had split up and he's jangling and they identify him because he's got all of the dandiness about him. It was just a weird person who was entertaining in the story.
Right. Yeah. And so I'm gonna pivot for sure. But one of the things that I liked about this story so much when I watched it the first time, when I watched the John Wayne version, is that you basically show up and this dude's got a reputation, right? And Maddie picks him because he's the brutal guy that gets the job done. And I don't remember if the John Wayne version has the court scene, but it's definitely something that sells better, in my opinion, in the 2010 version, which is she goes to watch him testify. And basically he kind of gets caught out in the sense that it's like, you're not entirely sure if he was on the level. Like he might be a little bit more Han Solo and shot first and ask questions later type, which is exactly what she wanted because she wanted the murder of her father avenged, right? And so you've got this guy's reputation. He can clearly handle himself in a fight by all accounts, but he's a drunkard. And so he's also kind of like the least reliable guy for the job. And so you've got all these big expectations and you hear all of these stories, and then you see Matt Damon's character who, has been on the hunt for a couple of years, but by all other accounts is just as able of a gun hand. So they have this unlikely thing, right? But what I loved about it is that he has a total breakdown in the middle of the movie, more or less, right? Like I'm not talking the direct middle of the movie, but in the middle part of the story, he has a breakdown. They have a falling out. They go their separate ways. Matt Damon's character bites off more than he can chew, gets his ass kicked and everything like that. And he fucking lives up to his legend at the end with the world like worthy battle cry of "fill your hands, you son of a bitch," which is come on.
Like,
yeah. So I thought part of the point of the movie was that
their reputation.
Maddie had True Grit and all these other posers didn't, even Rooster Cogburn. So it's Maddie who gives him manliness, if that's the whole Western thing.
He inspires her, she inspires him to live up to his legend in some ways, right? By getting that, getting their relationship, right? Like, there's definitely a part where it seems like he's willing to throw in the towel, but I think the subversion of that as well is that he and Matt Damon's character had clearly planned out their action, right? And so he might have been playing some of that up for appearances, like to me anyway, because the entire subversion, right? They get the drop on her because she's a little overzealous at the river, so they capture her. They tell Cockburn to leave. He takes her horse and they ride over the horizon, and you're never going to see him again. And now you're out here by yourself with all these gangsters and your dad's murderer right where you don't want to be. And then it turns out that he had basically gone and he had found Matt Damon's character, and they just rode hard around the ridge and come out and save her, is another thing, right? Like Matt Damon's character has to go into camp, but he meets them down on the range. So I don't know, like yeah, he's not a saint or anything like that, but by the end of it, I think he just kind of lives up to his reputation as much as anything.
Both of them did, because it wasn't just the reputation of the Jeff Bridges character running at people of like 1 against 7 or 1 against 4. I mean, that seems ridiculous and that's not possible. But then it was also Matt Damon's character living up to the reputation he was having of being a sharpshooter that they had spats about. And so both of them then respected each other, and they were working together for the sake of the girl. And I mean, the money might be there too, the honor might be there, but they had formed a connection between the 3 of them.
Right.
Thought it was a little sad she didn't get to say goodbye to him.
She didn't think it was sad. She didn't care. She's got true grit.
I think she thought it was sad.
You're an old softie. No, I'm serious. That's the point of the movie, right? You're an old softie. You're not even a man.
Yeah, she went to Tennessee to find him, to find that he had died 3 days previous and was sad. And so she took his body to her family plot. Like,
I see it as she's just tough as nails still. She has 1 arm. She's tough as nails. She won't show she cares, and she doesn't care as much as, I don't know. I guess I see the movie as much more on the side of just that Maddie being a hard ass.
She was definitely a hard ass, but if she cared about both of them,
and it also doesn't invalidate everybody else also having grit, right? Like, Matt Damon's character carries on despite being injured, despite personal grievances and that sort of thing. They get the job done. Rooster pulls his shit together and sobers up for 5 minutes enough to be able to save her. That's the thing. It's like they can all have a measure of it, right? Certainly Maddie's the hero of the story. She, of course, rides down and guns down those 4 dudes. And but she does get them together. She does accomplish her mission. And you see her grit in the form of her steely negotiation skills, if you can call it that. Be like, I'm sorry, that was my first and final offer. You just didn't realize 5 minutes ago when we started talking.
We're negotiating again.
Yeah, right. And that's what I'm saying. Like that character is the perfect, like he tries to be hard, but you can see him waver and then soften and then capitulate, over the course of their negotiation, to the point where when she shows up, he's terrified.
When she says to the stable boy, like say thanks or whatever it is, he's like, no, I'm not supposed to mention your name. Like, no, man.
Right. Yeah. So.
Oh yeah. I found it very a good movie as well.
Yeah, I like it. I do think I'm biased though, so I tend to like the Coen Brothers movies in general. So it has a lot of the pieces of it that I already like. They do it very well. I very much enjoyed the court scene in the way that they do tend to put in those little bit of character moments in their movies of just like, does it really impact the rest of the story? Kind of yes, sort of no, but mostly it was just people trying to be intelligent and clever and then getting caught out, or just like also the degenerate being a degenerate is funny on its own.
I mean, character moments are great that not necessarily affect the plot, because like you care more about the characters, therefore you care more about the plot. So I think there should definitely be more space in movies for stuff like that.
I mean, I think the post-court scene with him, bitching about the lawyer is definitely, one of those moments. But like in the
shooting as well,
like him being the witness and being on the stand is showing her what she wants to see from him, right? That she's heard about this reputation, but now she can see him in action a little bit, or at least get an after-action report and be like, oh yeah, he definitely shot first and asked questions later. That's exactly the guy that I want,
But
even though again, to fit. Sorry, I was just going to say, to fit Ben's trope about, announcing himself early, right? That's what Fill Your Hands, you son of a bitch was. Like he's come to kill you and you better defend yourself, so he still kind of lives up to that Western trope of being the good guy at the end, because he doesn't ambush the four riders,
barely.
So,
yeah.
I'm not saying he doesn't have other questionable things along the way, but
the point is he is the good guy, if only barely. He is an anti-hero. He is Wolverine from 1965, right?
And I love him for it.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
People loved him so much. There was, to the original movie, there was even a sequel with John Wayne?
Oh, there's like 2, I think.
Are there 2? Okay.
I don't remember if John Wayne was in all of them, but yeah, I think there were like multiple sequels, and they were like Rooster's Last Ride, and like they turned him into an IP.
In looking up, did you know that High Noon also had a sequel?
I did not know.
That's absurd. I don't think
so.
Absurd. Yeah. Anyway,
is it 3:10 to Yuma?
No, yeah.
to keep the time theme going. So, yeah.
Train.
Yeah, I guess John Wayne's like I said, he's The Rock, and he's the Ryan Reynolds. He's those actors who always plays himself. I feel like they don't really act all that much. Yeah. Unlike, I just think those guys have way more charisma than John Wayne ever did in anything I've seen with them. I find him very, very lackluster. Hot take, I don't know.
I don't think I've actually ever seen a movie with John Wayne in it, but I get that impression the same way. As I think the character is just going to be as predictable as that, and I don't know if it'll bring anything more to it.
Yeah, we definitely failed. So we picked out 5 westerns and none of them had John Wayne in it. But she's like, oh, I want to see more westerns. So I would say, I mean, you could go watch the original. I think even still the 67 version or whatever isn't the original, telling of True Grit. It's just the one that everybody is familiar with. The movie is very beat for beat. Like they're very similar, right? It's just kind of funny because I think the director and some other people for 2010 came out and said, we didn't remake the movie. We went back to the source material to make it better.
It was based on a book, both of them.
Right. Yeah, but John Wayne to me is one of those one of those people that it's like when they're acting, they're not their character. They're just whoever they are in in Chaps or whatever.
Katharine Hepburn is the same way.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage to me, right? There are very few movies that Nicolas Cage is actually acting in. Then the rest of them, it's just Nicolas Cage in a trench coat or in striped pajamas or whatever, and not to compare them because beyond that, that John Wayne and Nick Cage are very different people in that regard. But John Wayne definitely fancied himself with the whole I'm America's hero and I'm gonna because he hated High Noon, right? Yeah. For all of the blacklisting subtext.
Called it the least American movie or something like that.
I think I think when John Wayne was saying that, he was saying that because there's no common decency. That was kind of America's self-image, I would say.
What I had heard was that it was about the blacklisting. It was about the commies. It was,
sure.
And he threw his star down at the end of the movie and stepped on it, even though that doesn't happen. Right. And
but,
he took issue with 3 main points. So.
I mean, those might be very significant to him, but it's something I had just read about, what and why did he say this and at what time? He said that statement, but then he started emulating the Dirty Harry bad cop type of movies as well. So it was maybe he doesn't care about the guy throwing down the star as much as the commies, and what made it more coherent to me.
Well, maybe that's possible. That would be very John Wayne in character for him to do that. Yeah, so.
I think it was pretty fun, though. I think we had some solid movies. I don't think there were any that I hated, just that Django was uncomfortable to watch. Certainly Tombstone is every bit as brutal in some senses, minus, blowing people up with dynamite and dogs eating people, But, director, did you get some good movies out of it? You guys more familiar with the genre?
This has helped me investigate the genre more. Before watching Django Unchained this week, I watched the original Django to see was there even any similarity other than the name. Pretty much, right? No. Yeah, but the original actor of Django from the Italian spaghetti westerns, he showed up once, and right. I got that benefit, and that was it. I liked the original.
Who does Django. He play? Because I knew he was in it, but I didn't look it up.
He was the Italian that was also in the Mandingo fighting, the one that was when they first meet the DiCaprio character, and then he asks, "What is your name?" and Jamie Foxx spells it out. It's the D is silent. The guy looks at the camera in his very specific way of, "I know," and that's oh, that's him. Yeah. That's because that's how he does it throughout the rest of the other movie. That one was quite fun, though, Django.
I knew that. Yeah,
because he has a coffin and he does a heist with it. It's fucking weird. It's great. So, in my opinion, Andreas, you should have chosen one of the spaghetti westerns.
Right.
More likely, I would have picked the Magnificent Seven.
All right.
If you're talking about Django, if you're talking about Magnificent Seven, maybe next time we're going gonna do Akira Kurosawa movies. Those samurai movies that he did.
Also on my list of things I need to watch. This is kind of like both things. I'm realizing I've never seen Kurosawa movies. I haven't seen a bunch of westerns. I've got to get to some of these.
There's actually the first Django movie, A Fistful of Dollars, and Yojimbo are all the same movie, and the other two are based on Yojimbo. So we could do that. But would that be repetitive? That'd be like watching 310 to Yuma followed by 310 to Yuma.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like the Magnificent Seven, the samurai, all of that stuff, like foundational, definitely you're going to see those tropes pop up. Obviously gets remade basically with cowboys, right? And then, influenced a lot of other things along those lines. But yeah, I don't know if I want to, I guess it would be expansive, just go watch some old stuff. But yeah, it's actually kind of funny if like you look at his credits, there's just like a ton of like based on, so.
Right.
So we'll come up with a list for whatever it is we're doing next, as we've discussed like 4 different topics, and we did only one movie each, and we still took an hour and a half.
Right.
I think it's because we're able to watch the movies
with just one movie. We can, it's not an issue.
Yeah. When we spent like 40 minutes almost talking about Django and associated tropes and things like that, I was like, shit.
I love this stuff. This is the kind of stuff I like, going in deep more than just kind of broad. If we're going to do a large one, I wouldn't mind doing a tier list or something over a dozen movies, but let's do it over a couple episodes. I like going in depth a lot more.
And that was definitely where I was like, yeah, let's scale this back, because it's like, even if we can watch the movies in time, which was a dubious proposition at times, we certainly can't. Like, each movie's got to be covered in 5 minutes, and we're just not capable of doing that. We're capable of doing it in 12 minutes. So
There's a movie podcast I watch where it's one movie at a time, about once a week or every 2 weeks or something, and they easily fill an hour and a half or something every time.
Right. And I mean, we were doing that with the Perfect Movies thing. It's just we have to all agree, I guess, in some fashion or something about that. Like, the idea that we had of this is like, choose the favorite one of a genre when we first started.
Right.
And
it's also a different tact, right? In some cases, we had all seen the Perfect movie, and many of us might have agreed, or a couple of us might have needed to see it, and then we could quibble at that point, and there was back and forth in this. But these groups of movies that we were doing were sharing, right? That's kind of the difference. It's like, it's often movies that one or more of us haven't seen. So it started out like scariest and favorite horror movie, right? And then in this case it's favorite Western. So we all got to bring that. But if you want to actually dissect the movies, that's a different format, and certainly takes time. I mean, yeah, we could have easily spent an hour and a half on, almost any of these movies, certainly Django, and Quentin Tarantino's things and, stuff, but
surprising low amount of feet in Django.
Yes, there were. Yep. Jamie Foxx is hung upside down. There's like a 30-second scene of his feet. So I don't think that's what Quentin Tarantino's going for, but it's definitely there. There's definitely the feet. So,
I mean,
what a weirdo creep.
He is.
What a weirdo creep.
Weird.
Hey, man, don't kink shame. Everybody's
I will. That's gross.
I'll shave a little bit. It's like, I just don't get the feet thing. I cannot.
No, I mean, it's not generally my thing, but
to each their own. If they want to suckle some toes, as long as I don't have to.
Right? Who doesn't want some hottie to pour alcohol down her leg while you suckle it off of her toes? I mean, come on. So From Dusk Till Dawn, classic.
I mean,
for him,
there
it does.
are other things to suck on.
Fetish.
Yeah, for him, it
does. Yeah, body shots are fun. I'm sure.
But yeah.
I don't even. I guess I'm just going to close this because it's a weird topic.
You forget to subscribe to our page. Talk to us on Discord and get the list on Twitter.
Yeah, we'll figure out whatever the next thing is. Give us ideas and comments as to which we should focus on next. More westerns, pseudo westerns, sci-fi, Kurt Russell, Coen Brothers, Nick Cage, whatever.
Yeah.